Welcome back, Triumph Nation and Triumph Faithful. This past week taught us it's not just about who wins, it's about how they get there. Let's break it down.
Let's get going.
All right, first up, college football playoff. The first round is this weekend. We got a good amount of enticing matchups this weekend.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a huge weekend. We have really exciting matchups: Alabama, Oklahoma, Miami, Texas A&M. Yeah, those are the two I'm looking most forward to.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Tulane. I am interested in Oregon, so that'll be fun to talk about later.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you might notice something. I am repping that C.J. Stroud jersey. It was a great weekend in the NFL. The Texans dominated the Cardinals 40-20, so that is always a great time, especially if you're a Texans fan. You know, if we can score 20 points, it should be almost guaranteed a win.
Yeah, definitely with that defense, I would say that's a safe bet. But yeah, there was definitely some huge games, some huge injuries, which we'll go over.
Awesome. What do you want to cover first?
Let's go ahead and get into the Texans.
Cool. Well, Texans, they played the Cardinals. They won 40-20. It was not a typical defensive beatdown that you normally see from the Texans. They pretty much dominated in the first half, but when the Cardinals came back to play in that second half, the Cardinals, their passing game pretty much started to get rolling pretty good with Michael Wilson. He's done really good filling in for Marvin Harrison Jr. He's been really dominant. And then, of course, you have the best tight end in the league, Trey McBride. He's going to do his thing. And we were chipping him, doing what we could with Will Anderson and Azeez Al. But, he just dominated. He had a hell of a game. He made some records playing us. So that isn't a great sign. So that might be a weakness that hopefully we can get fixed this week. Because, again, we have another top 5 tight end coming to town with the Raiders and Brock Bowers. So I'm hoping we can get that figured out in practice and work that into the game plan to not have these dominant tight ends be dominant against us. But I'm very happy because we are getting hot. I said it last week. We're getting hot at the right time. Our offense is finally meeting the expectations that we had in the offseason. We were worried and skeptical about the offensive line, and in the first 3 weeks, those worries were coming to fruition. Offense couldn't do shit. They couldn't hold and block against a paper pan. So to see them finally clicking, and they have a good offensive line combo. So they've been really solid the last 4 weeks. Protecting C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud is looking vintage. He's looking like he did in his rookie season. So this offense is finally getting me hyped. I'm finally getting excited, and not like a naive excited, but we've got some proof to show, hey, this offense is starting to finally click.
Yeah, I agree. You should definitely feel excited. We talked about in the past weeks with that great defensive play that y'all are having. It's getting, I say near all time. You say it's already there. It's already all time defense, but they're very good. We can agree on that. But now that you're putting the offense together, C.J. Stroud, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 2 for 29. You can't ask for more than that. We talked about him being like the biggest key factor for y'all's success. Obviously, as a quarterback, that's not saying anything big, but that was definitely a piece that's been missing, definitely on the forefront of the season. He just doesn't seem like himself at times. But yeah, and then you have Nico Collins. He's always going to do what he does. 2 touchdowns, 85 yards. He's definitely a huge key factor. And then even y'all's running back, Jordan, 101 yards. It seemed like y'all couldn't do anything wrong on offense. And like you said, you can always count on that defense. So definitely I would feel excited, especially with the way the NFL is playing out this year. It seems like the hottest team's going to take it all. So y'all are definitely on the right trajectory looking into the later half of the season and into the playoffs.
Yeah, when you think about recent history, these NFL teams, there's usually somebody unknown offense, sometimes the defense, that just pops up out of nowhere. And this kid, Jordan, he was on the practice squad, and we pulled him up this past week because Woody got hurt, like he always does every week. So we decided to sit Woody for the rest of the game, and then this kid, Jordan, came in and he just performed above expectations. He showed explosiveness, he showed power, so I'm really excited about him. And then let's talk about some other matchups that we had on Sunday. As the playoffs are finally coming into full effect here in a few weeks, we're getting a good idea of who's legit and who's not legit. And for playoff seeding, where we want to be, the Texans, we want to win the division in the AFC South. So we're in a neck and neck race with the Jaguars. I'm not worried about the Colts, even though, they've got some hype going around Phillip Rivers. But I was hoping the Bills were going to lose against the Patriots. And it was looking like they were going to lose for a good amount of that game on Sunday. And then, Joshy boy does what he does every week. He is super clutch. He came back, brought the Bills back, and they won that game in Foxborough. So that wasn't a good feeling because, I wanted the Patriots to continue winning so we could get a higher seeding in the playoff race.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's safe to say at this point, Matthew Stafford's playing great, but I think it's safe to say that Josh Allen's the best QB in the league, definitely this year. So the guy just does it all. I really have nothing negative to say about him. There was always some criticism in the earlier half of his career, but this guy has just put the team on his back at times. I mean, he is the definition of that. 3 touchdowns, 193 yards, 19 for 28, but it doesn't really speak to everything that he's done in this game and even the week before. It's just like he's hot and he can't do anything wrong. So definitely these are the two teams I say are the most dangerous, heading into the playoffs. So it was really good to see these guys. Both of these teams really wanted the win this week, especially with the high caliber team they were playing. So it was definitely interesting to see how all that played out. And you see kind of how it goes in the playoffs. The QB is definitely the determining factor. Those guys are the ones that are able to take the reins of the game most easily. And you see Josh Allen is really comfortable and able in doing that.
Yeah, I've been going back and forth. Who would I rather see? Because if we keep the same seeding and the same trajectory, the Texans will be at number 7. So we're either going to play the Bills or the Patriots. We haven't played the Patriots in a while. We have played the Bills every year since I can remember, and we've had their number every time. So I would rather see the Bills, although they do have Josh, just because it seems like they're kryptonite.
Yeah, I could definitely understand that. When you talk about these teams that you play every year, that's the same I would say for the Cowboys and the Eagles. The Eagles more consistently have been a better team going deeper in the playoffs, obviously winning 2 Super Bowls recently. But it just seems like every time they get in there with the Cowboys, it's neck and neck, gritty game, and you definitely have a 50-50 shot of winning that game. Even if the Cowboys are 2 and something, the Eagles are 10 and something, you just know that with games like that where they're familiar, there's always a chance, and it just kind of feels like playoff football, for lack of better terms. When those teams you play that are familiar, that you play every year, it's definitely a different level of play.
What matchup interested you the most this past Sunday?
Well, I was definitely a sucker for the whole Phillip Rivers story, so definitely the Seahawks-Colts game. I was a little more dialed in than usual. I'll definitely say that. But 44-year-old Phillip Rivers throwing his first touchdown in almost 5 years. I mean, I don't care what sport you're in. You come back 5 years later and do something productive, it's huge, right? But now you're talking about the National Football League and playing quarterback. I mean, that's huge. And you see rookies come in. I mean, I know he didn't light up the stat sheet or anything, but come in and just have an abysmal game, not be able to put points on the board. But he consistently was able to get them to field goal range. I know they only scored 16 points. He got him a touchdown. Did he throw for more than 7 yards that game? No, but he was able to do what you kind of counted on him to be able to do. I mean, manage the game, talk some shit, rally the troops, and they had him close. I mean, the defense ultimately held the Seahawks to 18 points. You can't ask for more than that. So at the same time, he was able to do something productive for a 44-year-old after 5 years when you're looking at it from that standpoint. But at the same time, you have Jonathan Taylor, you have Pittman, and you held the opposing team to 18 points. You should win that game if you're a capable NFL quarterback. I mean, that was my opinion on it. What were you thinking?
I have to go with the same game, the Phillip Rivers story. And just touching on the last part of what you said, he got him on a game-winning field goal. What should have been. There was 45 seconds left in that game. And they should have won that game. And typically, the last 10 years, that would be enough to win the game. But this year, the NFL added a new kickoff system to where if you don't kick it right, you will get the ball at the 35-yard line. You might get it at the 40-yard line if it's not kicked in this certain area on the field. So, that we can say played a big part in Seahawks being able to come back and kick their own game-winning field goal. So, normally they would have got it at the 20 or the 25-yard line. Now they get it at the 35 or 40-yard line. They need 2 first downs, and they're in field goal range with Jason Myers. So there's a lot of factors. But like you were saying, we knew Phillip Rivers wasn't going to go in there and light up the stat sheet. That's not what he does. He hadn't played NFL football in 5 years. All they needed him to do was take care of the ball and do what he needed to do, be a game manager. And he did that, and they still lost. So I think, on the Colts standing, they know what they had in Phillip Rivers. These rookie quarterbacks, you don't want them to throw 2 interceptions, 3 interceptions, or not throw any interceptions at all in the game, but make that one mistake at the end of the game and cost them the game. So I think that was a great story for Phillip Rivers, just coming back, from coaching his son's high school football team, and then, seeing the post-conference that he had with the analysts saying, I'm just super proud of how I played and going out there and knowing that take the risk. It's worth the risk. You can do anything. Just don't give up. So I thought that was a really good comeback story. But really what stood out to me this past week was all the injuries.
Yeah, definitely. That's something we definitely want to touch on. Mahomes tearing his ACL. That was the big one we heard about. It definitely doesn't have any big playoff implications, which is definitely different this year since that dynasty's been together. But it's definitely interesting looking into the future of Patrick Mahomes' career. I know ACLs, people typically are able to come back easier, far easier than they were in years prior with today's technology and how all that's moving. So it's just interesting to see because with the injury, there can always be something that goes wrong, so it would be interesting to see how he comes back from that. And then obviously we had Michael Parsons have the same injury, ACL. That is going to have big playoff implications in my opinion, just because of how much the Green Bay Packers depend on that pass rush on the defensive side. He has the highest pressure rate in the NFL right now, so that is going to be a huge key factor that's missing for the Green Bay Packers.
I agree, and it's crazy because all these injuries, add in Devontae Adams' hamstring injury. All these major injuries to these 3 players happened within like 5 minutes, like real time. So that's just crazy, and you hate to see it.
You definitely never want to see that, even as a prior. I'm so upset with him. I almost said prior Cowboy fan. I'm a current Cowboy fan. Unfortunately, you never want to see. It's been a tough year, but you never want to see even prior players like that. Where you trade them, you never want to see them get injured like that. You still want the best for them. So it was definitely hard to see. Like we said, he's a major producer for that team, so I don't see how they get past that this year.
Yeah, like you were saying, he has the highest pressure rate in the league. When you lose a player of that caliber, that is just devastating. Do you see I don't see the Packers as Super Bowl contenders anymore. That's how drastic that injury was. Not just for Micah Parsons, I feel terrible for him because, he put in all this work. He just got paid, fortunately. But there was so much hype going around the Packers defense on, this defense they're legit. And this team can make a playoff push. They can make a Super Bowl push. And now it's like, they'll make the playoffs, but are they going to make a push? They're definitely, I don't see them going to the Super Bowl anymore.
Yeah, not at this point with the juggernauts you have on the NFC side, the Rams. I don't see them getting past them, definitely. So it's definitely going to be hard for them to, like you said, make it into those deeper rounds. But before we leave off these injuries, I did want to circle back to Mahomes. I did see an edit, talking about they are going to need a quarterback for the first, several games of next season because this injury happened so late. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is going to stay in Pittsburgh after this year, but it would definitely be interesting to see him in a Chiefs uniform. I was thinking about that. They're needing just a layover QB. He did have his best game of the season last night for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had a really big win there. They had a win over the Dolphins 15-28, so it was really good to see him in prime. I'm not going to say prime form. It was the best game of the season by him by far, and I do think he has some left in the tank, so I would be interested to see him play for the Chiefs. I mean, I'm definitely interested seeing him anywhere. I mean, for me, he's one of the all-time greats for sure. Like when he was in his prime, I can't name many other quarterbacks that were better than him, and that'll be a great debate for us for later. But just seeing him in his prime, I just love seeing, like we've talked about before, greatness. And I know he's not playing like he used to be, but if he's even able to make a deep playoff run, if he's able to do anything, at this age and what he's been able to accomplish in his career, like I just love watching it.
Yeah, he was looking mighty good yesterday. Some of those balls he was throwing, they were tight and sharp and looking clean. I like that hot take. Going to the Chiefs, that could happen. You never know.
Yeah,
guess what I saw yesterday?
What's up?
I was scrolling on Facebook, and I saw this knucklehead do a mock draft already. And the name that I saw, he did a mock draft for the Chiefs, and the name that I saw in the second round that they took, you would never guess.
What was it?
At QB. Diego.
Okay.
I mean, before this past weekend, I said, okay, that's interesting. I like that, maybe. Mahomes ain't going nowhere, but I like it. You never know. But after this past weekend, I'm like, whoa, this guy, he is smoking something.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that before the show. You definitely weren't. With his reaction to the Heisman results, I actually saw, I don't know if you saw the video of him they did a little thing where it's like break the stick whenever there's a Heisman candidate that's better than you. And they were naming off Cam Newton, Tim Tebow, who else was it? Like huge names, Johnny Manziel, and he wouldn't break the stick for anyone. And I just thought that was interesting. Obviously, maybe that's what you're supposed to do in those when you're trying to win the Heisman. Maybe you're not supposed to break the stick, be like, I'm better than everyone, vote for me. But I do wonder if, I guess what I'm trying to say is the way he reacted after makes me feel like that's how he really feels, and if that's the case, it's just not realistic. Ultimately, I'm not sitting and watching every Vanderbilt game every Saturday, but I've seen enough to know and looked at what he's been able to compile over his couple seasons at Vanderbilt, and it's just that's not what it's telling me.
Yeah, you want to have that mindset of I'm the baddest there is, but when you're not even the top 10, top 15 passing yards for this season, you have no fucking say, in my opinion. Get the hell out of here on your high horse. Yeah, I'm just really heated on that whole situation. Man, let's dive into the Heisman.
Yeah, Fernando Mendoza, he won. It's cool. You like to think of him as one of the good guys in the sport, right? The guy just looks like a good, can do no wrong, goody two-shoes type kid. He had nothing but nice things to say about the other candidates. Just talked well about his team and thanked his mommy on stage. Like, how can you hate the guy? For sure. But what I will say is it's definitely surprising to see, and I know I told you this before, but I was thinking maybe it's just a down year for the Heisman, because you look at his stats compared to Shadur Sanders in the year that he was in the running for it, and it's far better. His stats, completion percentage, and everything, and it's just interesting to see him win it over not only the past candidates that have won the Heisman before, but also the current candidates that were against him this year. And maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. But I have to say, this wasn't a down year on player performance. You had Jacob Rodriguez out of Texas Tech, who, in my opinion, should have won it outright. Yeah. The way that he has played this past year, he's led that team to first round bye in the playoffs. So if we want to go off of who is the most valuable player, he is the most valuable player. Not the most flashy, not the most hyped player. No, he's not. But he is the most valuable player to his team. So I'm just fed up with the Heisman AP rankings and the AP voting, because, in my opinion, none of the top four should have been in the top four. You had 3 quarterbacks, a running back, Jeremiah Love, who was in the top 4. He should have been in it, so I'll backtrack that. But the 3 quarterbacks that were in the Final Four should not have been there because they didn't even finish in the top 10 for passing yards this season. So the Heisman rankings and voting is just a freaking joke at this point. Then, you have Diego being butthurt the way he was. I sound like a real hater right now, but I'm a coach, so, kids who just think they're entitled to something, or people in general who think they're entitled to something that they aren't, like, get out of here. The way he handled that situation, not winning the Heisman this past weekend, it was unacceptable. When he was at a club partying and he had bought a sign that said F Indiana, that is just not a good look for him, in my opinion. It's not professional. It's not respectful. And then you see clips of Fernando talking about the other 3 finalists and just the level of respect that he talked with for those other 3 players, and talking about how, just the positivity he had towards those other players. That's very professional. And Fernando might have not have shown a lot of flash. He might have not have been a Baker Mayfield or a Trevor Lawrence like their stats showed when they won the Heisman. But if you're an NFL owner and you're looking at a leader who could lead your organization to some wins and change the culture, he's that guy. Because just what Cignetti's done with him, he can show that he's ready.
Yeah, for sure. The only way, just to talk about the earlier things you were talking about, the only way I can justify that win for him is obviously the team's 13-0. Anytime you quarterback a team that's undefeated, that's got to be the biggest factor that got him that. To your point, I do think Jacob Rodriguez should have won that. The team's 11-1, and he's the definition, kind of like what we talked about Josh Allen, putting the team on your back. I mean, he's done amazing things for that team, and I do think he's shown a lot of flash. I mean, the interceptions he's gotten, he's scored on offense. They had him playing quarterback to kind of put it in the face to the Heisman voters, kind of knowing how this was going to turn out this year, and it honestly wasn't a big surprise. But you see that he had more first-place votes than saying, so some people are aware, but it's just kind of like the NFL, It's an unpopular opinion, I would say, because a lot of the mainstream media talks about the quarterback is the most valuable player, but I do think that's kind of watered down at this point. I think that they're kind of, I don't want to say overrated. They have an important job, but I definitely think the other positions are underappreciated, to say the least. And I think Jacob Rodriguez is a prime example.
I love that kid. We're going to stomp JMU's ass this week. So that means we will probably play Tech next week.
Okay.
And I might feel a little different if he's dominating us. But, yeah, he should have won the Heisman. He deserved it.
Well, while we're on CFP, let's go ahead and do something we haven't done before. I'm going to go ahead and go through the first round of this bracket, and I want you to go ahead and make some picks for us. Kind of tell us what your thoughts are on these matchups and what you foresee, for lack of a better term. So, you ready for that?
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's touch on, I have no idea what you're going to pick here, but Oregon and JMU.
Oh, man, this is so difficult. I don't know who to go for. I'm going Oregon all the way. How could I not? So, Oregon's taking on JMU. Yeah, the tweets are cute, but Oregon will dominate in all 3 phases of this game. The wide receivers are coming back. They were spotted at practice, suited up, practicing in full capacity. So, I have no concerns with JMU. They might, the hype's going to be there in the first quarter. But after that first quarter, it's all Oregon.
Yeah.
I'm going, I'll go over 25 points.
Oh, wow.
I'm feeling confident.
Yeah. I can't disagree with you there. I don't see any way James Madison is able to pull it off. I don't think the point differential is going to be that egregious. I do think they're going to put up a fight, definitely in the beginning. At the end of the day, they're just not going to be able to hang, in my opinion. I love a Cinderella story, but we've talked about this in previous episodes. I just think it's going to take some time with NIL and a couple other things for these smaller conference teams to be able to compete in the CFP with these bigger teams. So I don't see anything different happening there. So I'm definitely looking forward to the Texas Tech versus Oregon. And I guess we'll be talking about that on the next episode, but it's not looking good for y'all past that. That's all I'll say.
Hey, you never know.
All right, so
Except for this pick where our Oregon's winning.
oh, okay. Let's get into the next one. Alabama, Oklahoma, 9 versus 8. It's shaping up to be a really good one. What's your opinion?
Both defenses are really solid. Venables has that defense in OU rolling. They've been really dominant this year. Won the last time that they played, and they got outgained by Alabama 406 yards to 212 yards. So there was some snappy plays that happened, but I think OU, their defense will keep it interesting, but ultimately Alabama's going to win.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm definitely leaning towards Oklahoma. You said they won their first matchup. I just think that they have the better put together team. Again, it's going to be a really close one. It's definitely a pick 'em. So I'm just kind of picking the team that I think is going to be able to overwhelm the other one. Ultimately, I'm going with Oklahoma. But let's go on to the next one then. Tulane versus Ole Miss. We're talking about another one. It's most likely going to be one-sided. What's your opinion?
Initially, I was thinking, Ole Miss just lost their biggest asset in Lane Kiffin. But after I had some time to think, all the other coaches are still there at Ole Miss. And I'm pretty sure those coaches are smart enough to flip that with those players and kind of build a chip on those players' shoulders. So I think Ole Miss is going to play hard, and they're going to dominate Tulane, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely think there's going to be an element of trying to be like, F Lane Kiffin, we can do the shit without him, all that good stuff. You saw a couple players tweet, things to the opposite of what Lane Kiffin was saying as far as what he was wanting to do for his team, trying to stick around and then kind of dipping out. It definitely wasn't a smooth transition for him. Obviously, he wasn't allowed to coach out the rest of the season. Ole Miss told him, basically dismissed him, like wanted nothing to do with him. They were super upset about the situation, and you heard that from some of the players on social media and stuff. So definitely they're going to come out with a chip on their shoulder. Not to saying that Tulane isn't, but they just have a big task ahead of them. Obviously, Ole Miss, bigger school, is going to have quite a bit more talent, quite a bit more higher prospects. So I think that's ultimately going to be the difference there. Next we have Miami and Texas A&M. Where are you leaning on that one?
Kyle Field is going to be electric. Yeah, it's an afternoon game. It's not going to be a night game. That might be a little difference. But ultimately, I think Marcel Reed will do just enough and do what he needs to do to keep A&M in that game, and I believe A&M will pull off the victory. What do you think?
It's a tough one, man. You got number 7 versus number 10. I'm going to go ahead and pick Miami on this one. I think their defense is a little bit more put together than A&M's. I would definitely say A&M has a better offense, but ultimately Miami's holding FBS teams to 277.8 offensive yards per game, which is quite a bit better than A&M's. So I'm thinking defense is going to be the difference on this one, and that's who I'm leaning with going into that round.
Yeah, I want to trust Carson Beck. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. There's just something about Kyle Field. They're going to have that place rocking, man.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a Carson Beck fan. Just seeing what he's put together at the other colleges he's been at, he's definitely, I wouldn't say the most reliable QB in this playoff right now. But like I said, I'm kind of leaning on the defense to be the difference on this one. But yeah, it's a great playoff picture.
Out of these 4 matches, what matchup intrigues you the most?
I would say the Tulane Ole Miss, like we talked about, Lane Kiffin leaving. You want to see how that school's going to respond. And then Tulane, I don't think we're giving them enough credit. Ultimately, I did pick Ole Miss, but they've put together a really good season this year. They've surprised everyone with what they've been able to put together. But that's definitely the one I'm looking most forward to. How about yourself?
Yeah, I know I said that Ole Miss would dominate, but I think if out of those 4 matchups, the team to get the upset would probably be Tulane. But to go off your other question, I'm excited for Oregon. So I'm not worried about Oregon losing against JMU. I'm just excited to see them play and see Oregon dominate.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be a great weekend, so we're definitely going to dive all into that in the following episode, so y'all definitely follow along for that. But do you have anything else on college football? Anything else you saw throughout the weekend that you wanted to touch on?
Nothing that I saw. There was some bowl games, but nothing super interesting. I'm sorry. I know I sound very blasphemous right now. But we would love to hear y'all's picks. Who do y'all got? Let us know how wrong we are in the comments.
Yeah, they'll definitely be good about doing that. I made a huge mistake last week. I got Kai Asakura and Tatsuro Taira completely mixed up, which seems unfortunately very racist, as they're the only 2 Asian contenders in the top 10 right now. So it definitely wasn't a good look, but hey, we all make mistakes. While we're on that then.
Yes, we do. It happens.
Let's go ahead and get into the UFC. We had a fight night this weekend. Manel Kape versus Brandon Royval. Royval coming off a loss to Joshua Van. You wanted to see how he was going to respond going against Manel Kape, who was a very high prospect coming into the UFC, and he's definitely had some ups and downs. But ultimately, every time he steps in there, you just see all the talent that guy has. He's just super flashy, super explosive, super technical, and very exciting fighter. So it's good to see him win, to kind of put a couple wins together. And it's looking like he's going to have a number 1 contender fight here coming up next. What were your thoughts on the fight?
So I'm looking down the fighters on this card. The names I recognize are Kape and Royval. I hope I said that right. Royval. Outside of those 2 names, I don't know anybody. But Kape, he folded Royval like a pretzel. So that was a very entertaining fight. And then the other 2 fights that intrigued me were Vallejos, his fight with, I don't remember his name. I'm sounding like a complete newbie right now.
Giga Chikadze.
Who did he fight? Giga.
Yeah.
He looked explosive against him. Vallejos looked explosive. And then he had this sick backward spinning knockout, which was awesome to see just for anybody, in my opinion. And then you had Asplin. Don't know too much about him. We were talking earlier about him. You were really hyping him up and really, really getting me on the Asplin train. Tell me more about that fight and what that meant for Asplin.
Yeah, to touch on that one, he has a lot of hype coming into the UFC, just kind of based on what he represents. If you can't tell by looking at him, the guy lost nearly 300 pounds. So that in itself is a huge feat. But to be able to fight your way to 7-1 to fight for a UFC contract, and then go in there in your debut and put on a performance like that against Sean Sheriff, it's super impressive. And then just his post-fight speech, how can you not love the guy, talking about having confidence in yourself, don't be ashamed of how you look. And if you're bullied, told you can't do anything, don't listen to any of that crap, just be confident in who you are, and how can you hate someone that represents something like that. So everything I've heard from this guy has just been super positive and uplifting, and that's exactly the type of things we love and definitely cherish here on this show. So that's just awesome to see from him. Anyone you see just come from rock bottom, for lack of better terms, and just do something amazing, which is win a fight in the UFC, is awesome. So he's definitely someone I'm looking forward to seeing how his career plays out. Right now, 7-1. You've got to be thinking he's looking forward to a quick turnaround. Definitely in the earlier part of next year. The UFC loves to blast these guys, get them on a fast track to some higher profile fights. So definitely is going to be bringing some life to the heavyweight division here soon, hopefully.
Okay, I was just about to ask what division was he in. So what fighter would that line him up with? Or potentially?
Tom Aspinall is a heavyweight champion right now. Obviously, it's looking like he's going to need surgery on one of his eyes. So Cyril Gane Most likely he's going to be fighting for another vacant title here shortly, probably. But he's got, several fights before he gets to that level. Again, this is his UFC debut, so you've got to think he's got at least 4 or 5 wins to get to that point.
So we're looking at like a year and a half, 2 years.
Minimum, yeah. These UFC fighters, like I said, they like to give these guys a lot of fights, especially if they're dominating the competition. I don't see him just running through everyone at this point in his career. I do think it's going to take some time for him to polish his skills, polish his ground game. He's definitely a striker. But once you get to the Almeidas and the Curtis Blades of that division, you've got to really be an all-around strong in everything that you do. So I'm thinking it's going to be at least 3 years before he gets to anything like that. But we've seen crazier things, and we've seen people with far less potential and talent, be put in those situations or put on a big string of wins. So you never know what's going to happen in the UFC, but that's definitely, regardless of where this goes for him, people are going to be watching.
Right. And like you were saying, minimum is a year and a half, 2 years. That's if everything goes right, and hopefully for his story, everything does go right. But it would be, I guess, good for him in a way to kind of have some setbacks again. Of course, his whole life has kind of been filled with setbacks, and he's just triumphed over all of them. So it would be interesting to see how he does it on the main stage in front of people and all these eyes watching him. That would be an amazing story.
Definitely. Another one I wanted to touch on was Yaroslav Almasov versus Neil Magny. Neil Magny is just one of the, I'd say, legends in the game. He's a veteran who's been in a lot of high-profile fights. He's definitely no slouch, definitely even at this point in his career. I mean, he was ranked, I think, last year, so he's not too far removed from that high-level competition. Almasov was a Bellator champion. This was his UFC debut. He was able to sub him 3 minutes, 14 seconds into the first round, so super strong showing. I'm definitely looking for this guy to be in the rankings here in the next year for sure. So very exciting. He's not one of the most exciting fighters as far as flashy knockouts or anything like that, but he has a strong ground game. And just another thing, knowing his background, you saw a video of him dressed in his full military outfit in the Ukraine war, just going and retrieving his belt from like some, I'm guessing it's a house or something, in a basement, wrapped in a towel, and he takes it out, dusts it off. That's just badass. I'm talking about the Ukraine war or anything or what he represents. I don't know anything about that, but just balancing those two things and still being able to fight in the UFC at a high level, that's just awesome to me. So he's definitely a high level competitor and a high level person. So you've got to be excited to see what he's able to do with his UFC career.
Yeah, there's some beauty in the realness in that aspect. When the UFC is given those types of stories, does that create like a big following and create a big fan base for those fighters?
Yeah, for sure. The only reason I knew about that is because they were posting about it before his fight. So I think they do a really good job of kind of letting us know and hyping these guys up before their fights, not after. After they do something crazy, they kind of prepared us to look for his fight, how it was going to turn out, and then obviously he wins. That's only going to bring more eyes. So as he keeps stacking these wins, obviously that's going to draw eyes itself. But the UFC does a really good job of building these guys up, or I'll say building up the guys that they want to build up. You've obviously got the Arman Sarukians and Francis Ngannou's of the world who they don't like. So either way, they do a pretty good job of that.
Come on, Dana.
No, I don't think he's wrong in that. I wouldn't. A lot of people would be quick to give Arman Sarukian that title shot, and for me, it's just like, I'd like to see him work back for it. I know he got that win over Dan Hooker, and people are saying, all right, give him the title shot now, but I'm not completely against Dana White saying, I'm not going to put a whole main event together, a whole pay-per-view together for this guy, for him to possibly do what he did last time. I know the chances of him doing that again are slim to none, but you got to think he put them in a completely rough spot. He did. So if the guy has to win one more fight, as good as he is, I think he'll be just fine. I do think ultimately he is going to get that title shot. But like I said, I'm not completely against how Dana White's handling it.
What weight division is that in?
Lightweight.
What are some of the fighters in that division.
Charles Oliveira, Dan Hooker, Dustin Poirier retired from that division.
So it's like Max Holloway.
Islam Makhachev just moved up from that division, so he moved up to 175. He was at 155, so
Damn.
Hanano, yeah, that is a crazy weight jump, but that's how the UFC is set up right now. There's a lot of debate that there should be a 165 or something in the middle there for those fighters in the middle, but I'm on the opposite side of that. I don't want to see it watered down like how boxing is. I think they have like 20 something champions, and that's just so ridiculous to me. But like I can't name off to you all of the boxing champions, but I can name off to you all of the UFC male champions. So I think there's some value to that, to have the focus on, those champions. And it says a lot to how hard it is and difficult it is to become a champion in the UFC, knowing that there's so many little divisions. I think it's 8 belts that are available out there. So there's a lot more that goes into it, in my opinion, versus boxing, where you're able to pick and pull in these certain divisions, super lightweight, junior division, like just a bunch of crap that really confusing to me ultimately. So I think that's adds some value to the title, in my opinion.
Yeah, when I think of boxing, I just don't care. I mean, the only couple boxers I know is Terrence Crawford. He just retired. And then, you got Canelo. Those are really the only 2 boxers I know. I know like a handful more UFC fighters, but to me, UFC is just so much more entertaining, and it just means so much more to me. I'm on the UFC bandwagon. UFC's better than boxing.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you there. They definitely put together way more high-level fights at a higher clip than boxing does. They put together the matchups you want to see almost immediately, to a point to where UFC fans are kind of spoiled when that fight doesn't come together. For example, Ilia Topuria, Islam Makhachev, or Francis and John Jones, or John Jones, Tom Aspinall. I mean, they're putting together all the other fights we want, and we're kind of spoiled to that point. But it's really just an indictment on boxing. Like, the characters are there. You've got Ryan Garcia, you've got Terrence Crawford, who I feel only retired because it's so hard to put those high-level fights together. Like, there's a lot of fights out there left for him, in my opinion. And they really, in boxing, what do you have? Maybe 3 big fights a year that, like, everyone's tuned in. And in my opinion, they just got to do a better job. The promoters got to be able to put it together to where when you take a loss, it's not like the end of your career. Like the UFC, you lose a fight, you're able to come back, you can still work your way up, fight for a title. And boxing is changing. It's getting better than it has been prior, but it's just so much harder to put together the matchups you want to see with the different promotions, the different titles. I mean, if you have your belt and you can just come and fight these contenders and make your money, make your paycheck, and keep your belt, then why even worry about it, right? So I do get where the fighters come from in that standpoint, but as far as the product and what you're wanting to see, boxing just isn't what it was, back in the early 2000s, 90s, and before. It's definitely changed into a diva sport, in my opinion. These guys are making 20, 30 million a fight, and they don't have to fight often, and they don't have to fight other champions.
Do you think boxing could be fixed?
100%. Like I said, I just think the culture needs to change. They've got to be willing to take a loss and be able to bounce back and get better. And they've got to, I want to say, pay these fighters, give them the incentive. But I think boxing, they make a shit ton of money there. So I think the promoters just got to do a better job of putting together those fights. And I think the governing bodies for the belts need to force these fights to happen at a higher clip. And until that happens, I don't see that changing. So, yeah, that's my opinion on it.
Yeah. So it's just really super mismanaged. Because do you think it's harder to recover and come back from a boxing fight or a UFC fight? Because I feel like they're somewhat similar.
You talking about like coming back from a loss?
Well, not from a loss, but just like the recovery.
Well, that's debatable, right? It's there's so many variables depending on what kind of fight you're getting into, what weight class and whatnot. But I would definitely, you could arguably say boxing is harder to come back from just because how much damage you take to the head. What's really surprising when you look at the numbers compared to UFC and boxing There's far more concussions, damage, and long-term damage for boxers than there is UFC. And you would think with the smaller gloves it would be the opposite, but what you see is that these guys are getting clipped and knocked out, and that's it. Versus the boxing, they have these heavy padded gloves and they're getting hit over and over and over through the course of how many rounds, and then in sparring over and over and over to the head. And you just see so many boxers with this long term, brain damage than you do in the UFC. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist in the UFC, but there's been a study that I can't specifically cite, but it very clearly shows that these boxers are definitely suffering from far more brain damage than these fighters are. So just on that aspect, I would definitely say you need a longer layoff when you're going through something like that, for your brain. I'm no scientist or what's it called, doctor or anything, but even in the UFC, if you get knocked out or something, you want to take some time off, to let your brain heal up, for lack of better words.
I feel like the UFC is everything boxing wanted to be. Just because, in boxing, like you were saying, you got like one mode, and that's just a strike.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get some body shots and body jabs in. But UFC is just like the whole full package because it's mixed martial arts. So you can do the wrestling, you can do the grappling, you can do the leg kicks, you can do all that other stuff. So there's like this fine balance that the UFC has really done well in their fighting and what they do as their philosophy.
Definitely.
Is that a smart take? Is that a good take?
Yes, that is a good one, because I'm going to agree with you. It's just a pure sport. If you run into somebody and you get into combative state, you're not going to be like, hey, don't kick me, don't take me to the ground. It's like, no, you're going to do whatever the fuck you need to do to win. Like, boxing is definitely a more sport oriented business, I would say. UFC, I would say, is definitely more natural, more, like I said, just pure kick. If I can hold you down on the ground for 25 minutes, that's what I'm going to do, because that means I'm going to win. So it's just so many other variables, so many other things you have to prepare for, versus like, is he going to punch me from here, here, or here? Or, I'm not trying to just simplify boxing, but there's a lot of different things that you have to prepare for when you're going into a UFC fight versus boxing.
All right, you want to get into some triumphant moments?
For sure, man. No big surprise here. I'm definitely going to go with Steve Asplund, like what he was able to do. Like I said on the front half of the show, I'm not going to go too far into it now, but, if you're bullied when you were young, if you were told you weren't worth anything, just be confident. Don't be ashamed of your body. Just like, he's just a prime example. The dude lost almost 300 pounds. That itself is like a crazy feat, and for him to do what he's doing now in the UFC, and not just that, just like even getting into the UFC is like just a huge accomplishment. So for him to go in there in his first UFC debut and get that knockout, huge triumphant moment for him. And to be honest, I'm definitely expecting more from him.
Like you were saying, just to lose 300 pounds, that's a big feat to accomplish just that in itself. How many people can say, yeah, I've lost 300 pounds, and then on top of that, to train their bodies as a UFC fighter would, and then to go into your UFC debut, and then to win that debut, that is super triumphant.
Many people can't say they lost 50 pounds, and this dude lost nearly 300.
My triumphant moment, it's not really a moment that has happened on the playing field, but really more so just a moment in the playing field of life. I'm talking about this kid out of Army. He plays football for Army. His name is Larry Pickett Jr. He's a special teams player, backup safety. He's a sophomore. He's played 2 years. He has 1 tackle in those 2 years. So I'm not talking about his play on the field, but I read an article last week about this kid named Larry Pickett, and he and his family were driving outside of West Point, and they came across this wreck where this guy had crashed into a utility pole. And now most people, when they come upon a situation like that, they just freeze. They don't know what to do, or they call the cops and let the cops handle it. But no, not this kid. He took matters into his own hands, and he went and saved that man from that burning car. That car caught on fire, a bunch of sparks, a bunch of smoke. and he saved that guy just in time. So he rushed right into the line of fire, and what he did was run to all the craziness. And he went and saved this man. He wasn't sure what the situation was, if this man was alive, how bad he was hurt, if he was hurt. He didn't know if he would get hurt trying to save this man. But all that didn't matter. He went and saved this man. And that man, end up meeting him later on and saying, "Thank you, you saved my life. I'm never going to live life the way I have up to this point." That just goes to the fact of what we're truly about. It's a triumphant moment. You're going to get knocked down. You're going to get beat up. He's made one tackle the last 2 years playing football. Football is something that he loves. So, somebody might take that and get down and give up. But no, not this kid. He never gave up. His mentality never gave up. And to me, that just shows the amount of discipline that he has, and that he has unwavering values and unwavering resolve whenever he is getting beaten down. So that's just a truly triumphant moment to me.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. It's just a beautiful story, the way you put it. And just be able, the first thought in his mind is to do a selfless action and not be like, oh, am I going to be injured? Am I going to be okay to play? Is it going to jeopardize my future? Am I going to get hurt, trying to save someone if it's already too late for them? Like, those thoughts didn't come across his head. He just, like you said, went into the fire, pulled this guy out, and just touched someone's life and changed their life for the better. It's just a beautiful story, like I said. So yeah, I'm 100% with you. Triumphant moment, and it's definitely at the top of the list for the ones that we've talked about so far.
Yeah, these are some great triumphant moments. And they're great because they're not just particular to any superstar athlete. Anybody can be triumphant in any day life. So it's an amazing thing to see.
Yeah, definitely. There's still good out there. There's still great people out there. So, I mean, we just need more of it, obviously. It's not always going to be the champions, the star quarterbacks, or anything. Like you said, it can just be the normal person in everyday life. And maybe you're out there and you're able to make a decision or do something that changes someone's life for the better by just upholding your values and just being a good person, and then just trying to leave the world in a better place you found it. So that's definitely what we want to represent and encourage. So yeah, can't wait for the next one.
See y'all on the flip side.
See y'all. Appreciate it.